On today's show, part 2 of my chat with Locked On Mavs host Nick Angstadt, previewing everything you need to know about this round 3 of the Clippers Mavs. In this one, we focus on us, the Clippers, talking about why our defense fell off, difference that James Harden has made, what impact Russell Westbrook could have, and everything else you can think of. And we got a bonus episode coming out also on Thursday on today's Locked On Playoff Clippers.
You are Locked On Clippers, your daily Los Angeles Clippers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, here we go. Nick Angstadt, Locked On Mavericks. Darian Vaziri, Locked On Clippers here for part 2. And I'm asking you, Darian, questions about the Clippers. Let's talk about this Clippers team. Let's start just real easy. How are the Clippers different than the ones the Mavericks saw in 2020 and 2021? Still Kawhi and Paul George, but how is this team different?
Less wings defensively and James Harden and Russell Westbrook.
I don't like that as much.
Yeah, so no Nico Batum, no Marcus Morris, no Patrick Beverley, but you do have a more experienced Terrence Mann, that, he actually wasn't even getting full rotation minutes in those first couple of games against the Mavericks in 2021, but now he's been a consistent starter the whole year. And then James really having a third star is the major difference. James Harden, who obviously wasn't an all-star this year, but if you talk to a lot of Clipper fans, he and Paul George, especially at the time that Paul George was selected as an all-star reserve, a lot of Clipper fans thought James Harden was playing better, and he truly did have a case at the time. Paul George obviously ended the season in a much better form than James, but that's the major difference is we don't have as good of defensive personnel. We have an older and more mature Zoo and Terrence Mann and a true third, star guy.
Yeah, that third star guy, we talked about him in the last crossover. I think he could be the real swing player for the Clippers in this. How has he changed the Clippers? Like, what has he brought to the Clippers that has changed them?
He has become, or he's been the Clippers' best pick and roll player since Chris Paul, which CP3 is one of the best pick and roll players of all time. So is James Harden. He's brought that ability to make passes that other guys just don't make with the same regularity. He is truly a special passer of the basketball. And James Harden is a great pull-up shooter, so much so that you have to go over the screen. And that's how he's made his money his entire career. You have to go over the screen with him, and then he will have some of the best pocket passes of anyone you'll ever see. Great passes to find open shooters, and he can finish the rim. But the scouting report will say this, and every team should know it. He has not been as He has not been as willing to take the floater, and that used to be money for him, and that has really hurt him. If you're a smart defensive team with Harden, the main thing you got to do is contain him as best you can at the point of attack, have a solid drop big, and force him to play in the in-between game, because that was something that he neglected for many years with D'Antoni. He would only shoot threes and layups.
Yeah, right. It was the Morey ball.
Right, and he got away with it to a large degree, but now he doesn't have that same burst where he's turning the corner with that same explosion. And he doesn't have the same elevation. Like back in the day, James Harden used to be able to dunk on guys. Now, it's rare for him to even dunk, period. So when he's in the mid-range area, a lot of times he'll do this push-up, stiff arm to create separation and step back. He doesn't really stop on a dime or anything like that. So putting him in those uncomfortable situations of the in-between game and making him take that mid-range shot, staying home on shooters, that's the game plan for James Harden. But my question is for Dallas is, can you guard James Harden at the point of attack well enough when Derek Jones and Pt.2 Washington will be likely guarding Kawhi and Paul George a lot more?
Real quick, who do you think has more dunks this season? Kyrie or James Harden?
It might be Kyrie, because I legit don't know if James Harden has more than like 3.
James Harden has 2. Kyrie has a career high 6 dunks this season. It's insane how many dunks he had. That one alley-oop where he cocked it back and threw it. I mean, he's hit the fountain of youth in Dallas in some ways. But to answer your question, I'm actually like you'd think that Derek Jones Jr. and Paul George and Pt.2 Washington will take Paul and Kawhi, but like that point of attack thing is such a great point, because Derek Jones Jr. has been their point of attack guy. The Mavs, after the trade, they tried to start Josh Green in that spot instead of Derek Jones Jr. And his point of attack defense just wasn't as good, wasn't as crisp. He can't get around screens as well. It's just something about, I think it's his hips. I just don't think he can get around like the screens the same way that Derek Jones Jr. can, and he doesn't have the same kind of length that obviously Derek Jones Jr. has. And so maybe they start Derek Jones Jr. on Harden instead and just decide to like deter that and like, all right, like Paul George beat Luka one-on-one or something. I don't know what else they turn to if they decide to do that. That's for coaches to decide and not me. But yeah, that is going to be an interesting problem for the Mavericks to have to try and figure out is how do they guard James Harden in all this? And he's changed their team a lot, I think. I think it's one of the reasons why they've become such a great offensive team this season is that he adds a whole other element. In the past, you didn't have to worry about Clippers pick and rolls, at least that version of the Clippers team.
At all. And I think what he's also done is he's given Kawhi and Paul George a lot more open threes that they've ever really seen.
Yeah.
Which the only fear is sometimes you don't want to go too James Harden centric to the point where you're making the two best players on the team too much of spot up guys and then they're kind of out of rhythm. You still want them to be in attack mode. But he has given them so many more open threes than they're used to. And then Ivica Zubac has gotten more just bunnies at the rim due to the gravity and the pick and roll of James Harden. So Zoo and Harden's pick and roll chemistry was peaking right before Zubac got hurt. However, I still think those two's pick and roll chemistry will be fine. It's a matter of how quickly is James Harden turning that corner? What kind of advantages is he creating in the half court against this improved Dallas defense, but still question marks in my opinion. I mean, I know second in defensive rating since Gafford's arrival. Is that what it is?
Yeah, since the beginning of February.
Exactly. But when you play in the regular season and you play all these different teams, the numbers are relevant, but when you're playing against a great offensive team every single game, that's going to be the truest test of your defense. And that's the thing I love about playoff basketball is all your flaws as a team will come out. And we didn't quite mention it enough in the part one of this episode, but if you're the Mavericks, especially with the increased pace of this new Dallas team, you got to push the pace on the Clippers. I know everything. I know all the weaknesses of the team that I see every night. They are slow and old. You got to push the pace on these guys and make them look like geezers. Anthony Edwards was so comfortable saying that they're old and slow. So yes, the game slows down in the playoffs, but if the Mavs can speed it up and expose the fact that the Clippers are a poor defensive team in transition. Half-court defense, not bad. For the first half of the season, when the Clippers were on their amazing run, they had some of the best half-court defensive statistics in the league, which never fully matched the eye test, but a lot of it is because Ivica Zubac is protecting the rim really well. And believe it or not, months December, January, end of November, James Harden was actually playing some solid defense. He wasn't a liability by any means. He was getting several steals and blocks a game, but it kind of phased out as the toll of the season happened on his body. So transition defense is a weak point for the Clippers and lack of speed.
Yeah. And then if I was going to say the Mavs weaknesses in the same kind of vein, it's speed. It's the Pacers destroyed the Mavericks in 2 games after the trades. Pacers scored 133 in one and 137 in the other game and just like absolutely blew the Mavericks off the floor. And it made me want to fire the coach. It got me to that point where I was like, hey, the Mavericks are just having the same problems over and over again. And then they rattled off a million wins to end the season. And we haven't really seen this team enough. This is one of the bad things, good and bad things about having this brand new team that is not the same team that they had even in January or December, is that we don't know all their weaknesses yet. There could be some that emerge in the playoffs and we go, oh my gosh, we didn't even really see this coming because we didn't play a team that does this against the Mavericks. And so that is something I'm curious about. But if the Clippers don't have the speed, that is one thing we do know that the Mavericks would struggle with is speed around the perimeter. And if they're not going to struggle with that, or a big that can shoot, they've struggled with a big that can shoot every once in a while, and the Clippers don't have that either. And so I'm curious if they have either of those that'll hurt the Mavericks, or what other weaknesses will come up. But coming up, let's talk about why the Clippers defense fell off so hard for a couple months there, because they were playing pretty decent, and then all of a sudden they were the second worst defense in the league for a couple months. Let's talk about all that and more with Darian from Locked On Clippers coming up. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Darian and I we're both pretty competitive guys. You coach a basketball team. You've got a bunch of people that are looking to you as the main person to like, all right, get us going. Like let's figure out how to win. Well, if you want to figure out how to win in a different way, you can play Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded 150 million times. 150 million. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you can play not one but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy different locations. Even the moon. You can play Monopoly on the moon. I don't know if you knew this about Monopoly Go. You can mess with your friends too. You can charge them rent on iconic properties such as the classic Monopoly places. The leaderboards show you who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. If you want bragging rights to your friends, you can do that. Or you can just play by yourself. If you can't find somebody that wants to play a real long game of Monopoly with you, you can play Monopoly Go, and it doesn't have to be that long as long as the actual board game. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. Monopoly Go on the App Store or Google Play. All right, Darian, thanks everybody for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs, Locked On Clippers, the crossover, being part of the show. If you listen to Locked On Mavs every day, you're part of the Raccoon Squad. Thanks for listening every day. Appreciate each and every one of you. If you want to support the shows, go subscribe on YouTube, go subscribe on Apple and Spotify. Listen every day, 5 days a week, all throughout the playoffs as well. Great content all the time. If you didn't listen to part 1 of our crossover, go listen to that one. We talk a lot of Mavs stuff over there. We're talking Clippers in this one. I'm curious about their defense. It fell off for like 2 months where they were 14th from the beginning of the season till the end of January, 14th in defense, so like average. And then from February to the end of March, they were 29th in the NBA in defense. What happened in that 2-month stretch?
I think age caught up to the Clippers a good amount. Zubac's being injured changed a lot because he really has anchored a defense that has not been very good at the point of attack all season long, very average at the point of attack. He's found a way to change shots, deter guys at the rim all season long. And when he was out, as I mentioned in the last episode, Mason Plumlee, Daniel Tice, they're not exactly the best rim deterrents. They're good at what they do, but they're not exactly intimidators at the rim that'll really alter shots and stuff of that nature. So
unless Tice is playing in FIBA and then he's like amazing for Germany.
I will say though, Tice has had a very good season, but yeah, that's the one aspect of his game that he's not really going to protect the rim. He's going to try his best though. He's going to get more blocks than Mason Plumlee despite him being shorter, but it's still not anything that will be scary for any offense. Now, also James Harden. James Harden was actually playing some solid defense, as I was saying, in those months that we were rolling. That bad James Harden I mentioned in the last episode, the one that wasn't scoring very much and wasn't creating the same advantages and looked like he was slowing down, he started playing the defense that James Harden has become notorious for playing when things aren't really going the best.
It's a very relatable thing that you're talking about right now.
Right. So that's part of what happened as well. And then Terrence Mann, my favorite Clipper. Terrence Mann is a solid defender, but if he's the guy that's taking the best part on the other team every single game, it's just a task that's a little too tall for him. To me, on a championship level, and I've said this on Locked On Clippers all year, I think he's a very good defender, but I think his best role is to be one of your point of attack guys, not the main man guarding the best players every single night. And if you're wondering why don't Kawhi and Paul George do it, well, because they're 32-plus-year-old stars with a lot of mileage on their legs that are extremely important offensively. However, another reason the Clippers defense was better in that stretch early was Kawhi Leonard and Paul George were taking bigger defensive loads because when the Clippers first got James Harden, they realized, okay, you don't have to do as much offensively, Kawhi and Paul George, but we did lose Nico Batum. We did lose Robert Covington. So you're going to have to step it up defensively. And they absolutely did. And, Kawhi's been playing the 4 all season long, and he's guarded very good players. And at times, Paul George would take guys in point of attack, and they did a very solid job. But as I said, age, you started seeing guard good players less. And, yeah, you saw a big fall off. And when the offense slowed down, that allowed teams to get out in transition and expose a major weakness.
You're saying a lot of good things. You're saying for the Mavericks fans, you're saying a lot of good things. You're saying a lot of good things for it. You talk about Zubac as like the key for their defense a lot. Him and James Harden in the pick and roll has been really key for their offense diversifying as well. Yep. What's the key for him staying on the floor? Because we keep talking about this. I think every national media person is going to talk about, wow, Luka will play Zubac off the floor. And yes, it's happened several dozen times. What's the key to keeping him on the floor?
The key to keeping them on the floor, in my opinion, is that drop coverage doesn't get absolutely torched. I don't have the stats on me, but 90+% of pick and rolls that Zubac defended, I would assume, and it's a safe assumption, is drop coverage. He rarely comes out to the level of the screen. He rarely comes out to the perimeter. He rarely will switch onto a guard, which, Mavericks fans are thinking, what are you talking about? He always switched on to Luka back in the day. Yeah, that's why we were down 2-0 in the series. When he was switching on to Luka over and over. I don't know what Ty Lue was thinking. Like, one of the major things is if Ty Lue is not making weird decisions like he was in the first 2 games of 2021, then it's not going to be as easy as Dallas fans think of, oh, we took him to 7 and now we have a much better team, so it'll be no problem. If Ty Lue's not allowing Zubac to just get destroyed but that is one major weakness of the Clippers, is that they're so switch heavy in the sense that they'll switch anything. So if you're not being strict on your switches with Kyrie and Luka Doncic, then Luka and Kyrie are essentially just picking who guards them. And that's extremely dangerous for somebody like Luka. Exactly. So the key to keeping Zubac on the floor is drop coverage, not getting absolutely destroyed. Here's the thing. It's Luka Doncic. You're going to have to give something up. We'll just see if drop coverage doesn't get absolutely destroyed. I can't tell you that the options of defending Luka Doncic and pick and roll are like that amazing for the Clippers. Like, I don't know if it's that amazing for any team in the league. I think ideally you'd want to switch everything personnel to just make him play a bunch of one-on-one and try your best to keep the ball in front. But as I said in the last episode, the Clippers don't have the same small ball personnel.
That was another thing about those 2020, 2021 Clippers, that the reason why some people, I know you've seen the Steve Smith clip or the Buckets podcast or whoever else. There was an ESPN bet segment recently where like people really legitimately think that the Mavericks won one of those series, which is it's funny to me. And like no Mavericks fans think that because we all remember those series very well. But like people think that because the whole narrative around those series was, well, if there's one team that has all the wings that they can throw at Luka, all the defensive wings to throw at him, Nick Batum being awesome, Kawhi being a defensive player of the year, Paul George being an all defense type guy, even Marcus Morris being a big wing, Terrence Mann being a pest, Patrick Beverley being a pest. He had a bunch of guys to throw at him, and now those numbers are dwindling down. It's like the ways that the Clippers beat the Mavs are kind of going down, and the way that the Mavs got beat are going away. I think like these teams are finally meeting in the middle. I think, and this is why I'm really excited for this series, is because the Mavericks are, I think on FanDuel, we'll talk about them in a second, but they're I think the Mavs are favored right now, and they were not favored at all in the first 2 in 2020 and 2021. They were not supposed to win. Clippers were a title contender, and the Mavericks were just like this budding fun with 21-year-old Luka trying to figure out playoff basketball for the first time.
Exactly. This is the first time where both sets of fans expect to win. I mean, I've seen Dallas fans. Yeah, Dallas fans have found both of my channels. Then they're already talking about go Mavs, Mavs in 5. I think this series is going to go 6 games bare minimum, unless Kawhi doesn't play multiple games. If Kawhi doesn't play multiple games, which is it could be it is a possibility at this point. I don't know what to think about that.
I've got a poll on the Locked On Mavs YouTube channel that's how do you think this series goes? I'll let you know that only 4% think the Clippers will win. I'll let you know that. But I'm not surprised by that at all. It's a Mavs channel. But 61% say Mavs in 6 or 7. So I mean, there's some respect there for sure.
Right.
Of the Clippers and what the Clippers can do there. And that's like a completely biased like voting of like only Mavs fans basically.
Right.
But coming up, let's get into some more things about the Clippers. I'm curious about where Westbrook fits into all this. I'm curious what the biggest offensive issue and what the biggest defensive issue are of the Clippers. We'll talk about all that and more coming up. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook has all kinds of props and odds that you can use to get in the game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. So go check out what they have on FanDuel. I said it earlier, and I was right. I just looked it up. Mavs minus 118 to win the series. Clippers plus 100. It was Clippers minus, they were like minus 1 something. And the Mavs are minus 1 something. It was really close when they first opened. And it slowly inched towards now Mavs are favored in this series. And I think that's really fascinating. I think it's a very marginal difference. And I think it's mostly because of the money that's probably gone on the Mavericks instead of the Clippers. That would be my guess on that. But the Kawhi news is also kind of fascinating to think about with all this and how to bet on it. So if you want to do any of that, go check out FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can put your bet down. You win $150 in bonus bets. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon. All right, Darian, let's get into the rest of the questions about the Los Angeles Clippers of Los Angeles. I'm curious about Russell Westbrook. Where does he fit into all this? How does he fit into the half court? How much run do you think he's really going to get? Because we talked about in the other episode, the other crossover, that they can't really play that Westbrook, Harden, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard lineup anymore. They tried it when they first got all together. They started it against the Mavericks in one of those matchups, and it just hasn't really worked out. And so where does Westbrook fit into all this? We talked about him being like the energy guy. How does he fit into a playoff setting, you think?
Most of the season, it's been Russ comes off the bench for Harden, takes that second unit. A lot of times he'll play the second half of the first quarter with Kawhi. So basically all season long, the Clippers rotation is take out Harden around this 6 or 5 minutes left in the first. Paul George will come out a couple minutes after, and then Kawhi will play the whole first quarter. Then Paul George and James Harden will play the whole second quarter, and that repeats for the second half. So Paul and James have played a lot of full fourths, and Kawhi will almost always play the whole first and third, which that rotation pattern is controversial in its own way amongst Clipper fans. And I've talked about it a lot because what happens is though sometimes Kawhi Leonard won't have shot the ball in the fourth quarter till like 5 minutes left in the game. And that's just not ideal. You want your best player being in a rhythm. So Westbrook, he's been an energy guy. He played a lot better defense in the first half of the season, which also is part of the answer that I forgot to include when you asked that. Westbrook, when he was still technically eligible for all defense, he was going really hard. He was like doing a great job off the bench, but the second it was not, and his own fans even pointed it out to me. That's the crazy part. The stands.
He played 68 games. Why is he not eligible?
I think there was a certain minutes limit. That's what his stands were telling me. There was a certain limits minute you had to hit, and his defensive end intensity totally dropped off. But then after the injury, and he comes back from the hand injury, he's been defending pretty well again. So my thing is, we know what Westbrook can do great. It's just a matter of how much burn will he get. And to answer your question about that, I truly don't know. Because as you said, those four together haven't been used much. And the only time it works is if the fifth guy is a spacer. So essentially a small ball lineup, which we haven't seen much of. Yeah. Right, with Powell. There's James Harden and Norman Powell you can potentially pick on there. So, and I don't love Westbrook and Harden together in the half court alongside Kawhi and Paul. It just feels like a lot of times too many cooks in the kitchen. But the thing is, there might be some moments where the Clippers the game calls for more Westbrook's abilities than Harden's. I just don't think throughout this season it's shown Ty Lue doesn't feel like that. It doesn't feel like they're situational. It's usually like Harden's going to get the minutes and maybe Westbrook will get them. But it's not been, that kind of situation where it's like, oh, if Harden's playing well one night and vice versa. It's not been like that. It's Harden usually plays big minutes every night.
Yeah, he came in as a star. He's the multiple-time MVP. I mean, you've got a level of pedigree that you have to play him. Like, it's just kind of how it is. And it's kind of been amazing that Westbrook has accepted that type of role, right? That he's accepted coming off the bench and all that. I mean, that was a whole conversation I know you were having on Locked On Clippers at the beginning of the season. Between the both of our teams, how many stan groups do we have? We have Luka stans. We have Kyrie stans. There are definitely Westbrook stans. There are Harden stans. Are there Kawhi stans? Do they exist?
Do they exist? They're the majority of the comment section on Locked On YouTube. They're insufferable, in my opinion. I mean, they're just insane. And the Kawhi stands know I give them a hard time. But I feel as though, it's funny you mentioned Kawhi. I feel as though we haven't talked about him enough in both these episodes. And we should, because it's Kawhi Leonard. He's playing. It feels,
well, we talked about Luka, like defending Luka, I guess. But like we also haven't talked about Luka that much because it's just like, you know what you're getting at this point, right? It's how have these things changed? What are the X factors? That's sort of what we get into in some of these is that, like, okay, I know what I'm going to get with Kawhi, right? Unless he doesn't play, which is a whole different thing.
Let me just say this, though. Kawhi Leonard we always talk about how good Luka was against the Clippers, but one thing I just don't think that we focus on enough as basketball media and people is Kawhi and what he's done to Dallas. Yeah, you guys know.
That game 6, I will never forget that game 6.
That might be the best single performance any Clippers ever had. But
amazing.
It was insane. I just couldn't believe the level that he went to. And in that series, he was putting up efficiency like Shaquille O'Neal level. And with the shots that Kawhi's taking, just amazing. He's been amazing this season. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, this is a thing I wanted to bring up in the other one that I forgot. The difference in the types of defenders that are going to defend Kawhi than the ones that like this season than the ones that were before. Like, are so different. I mean, I have vivid memories, and I don't know if you remember, of Seth Curry trying to guard Kawhi in those series, and like Maxi Kleber, like Rick Carlisle looking at Maxi Kleber and being like, hey man, I know he's like way better than you. I know that he's going to torch you every time, but you just got to go out there and do your best and just kind of stay with him, and you're going to get destroyed. But like going from a Tim Hardaway Jr., Maxey, Seth Curry, Trey Burke, Jalen Brunson sometimes. They tried Josh Richardson, and he just didn't have enough offense. Like, to go from those guys and the Luka then 2 years ago, to now Derrick Jones Jr., PJ Washington, Dante Exum, Luka now. Like, I think that the Mavs have just much better, like, they have much better answers for Kawhi Leonard. And I'm curious if Kawhi Leonard has the same kind of like, and we haven't seen Kawhi in the playoffs. You've seen 2 games since 2021. I mean,
right.
We haven't seen playoff Kawhi in a little while either. I'm curious to see what he looks like.
Yeah, fun fact for any Mavs fans that don't know, Clipper fans have never seen Kawhi Leonard in a playoff game in a sold-out crowd. Never. In 5 years, which is insane. And I can't believe it's in question again. I thought 68 games this season. I was knocking on wood the entire season, and it was working out. He had stayed healthy, and he's been playing at an all-NBA level. The one thing about Kawhi that hasn't been as great, his defense is still pretty fantastic. And we have when a big man gets pulled out of the paint a little bit, he is the main low man rotator that's been awesome this season. But when you don't have Kawhi in there in games that he doesn't play, there is no secondary help for Zoo or any of the bigs when they get pulled out of the paint. No low block protection, nothing of that nature. So Kawhi is so big for the off-ball defense, even though he's known more originally with San Antonio as such a good on-ball defender. And the funny part is when teams try to go at Kawhi, which never happens, but when he just ends up guarding the point of attack, teams usually just don't get good shots. He's still so solid defensively. So I think one of the keys to the Clippers is, and this is part of the reason the series kind of turned around in the Clippers' favor in 2021, is Kawhi guarding Luka as the primary defender and not just switching with every screen that he saw.
Yeah, right.
That's a big thing. Is Ty Lue is so switch heavy. He will allow, as we mentioned in these episodes, he will allow anyone outside of the bigs to switch 1 through 4 without hesitation. Here's the issue. You're going to do that with Dallas? You're going to switch James Harden on to Kyrie Irving whenever he wants? Be my guest. I don't know if it's going to work out well for the Clippers. You've got to be more selective with the switching if you're the Clippers, and I'm really curious to see when push comes to shove, nobody can guard Luka. When's our actual best defender going to do it, and how much can he do it? It's very relevant.
Do we care about any of the Brooklyn Harden versus Kyrie rivalry? Like, because I think Kyrie does a little bit, because in one of those first matchups that they played, I could tell Kyrie was like, "Oh, I want to beat this guy," and I'm curious if that feeds in anything. But like, do the fan bases care about any of that?
I don't think the Clipper fan base doesn't care at all, but I think it's a great storyline for their careers, that they're going to play each other in the playoffs after James Harden was fairly public about the fact that the whole Kyrie vaccine thing was part of the reason he wasn't feeling the situation over there in Brooklyn. So that's going to be interesting. As far as I wanted to respond to your thing about more bodies to throw at Kawhi, who do you think is a better defender, Dorian Finney-Smith or PJ Washington?
Man, before this season, I would have said hands down Dorian Finney-Smith, but PJ has been so good, and he's so hungry. He's never played in the playoffs. He's played 2 play-in games with the Hornets where they got destroyed in those 2 games and got knocked out immediately.
Terrible.
And he's so hungry to play in the playoffs. He's been amazing, and I think I would still give it to Dorian, because I've seen him in playoff settings, and I've seen him guard some of the best players in the NBA, and I will like ride or die forever for Dorian in so many ways. But it's close. Like, I think they've both been very good, and I've been really surprised by PJ's defense, and I think Derrick Jones Jr. has been as good, if not better, in some ways than what Bullock was too. And so the Mavericks have like recreated this kind of thing, and now they have a center too, which is like amazing. Also, never had that.
How about, so what's Derek Lively's status though? And by the way, I want to give my condolences to his family and himself, but what is his status certain for this series? Because that's major. Isn't the whole thing that the Mavericks have had 2 lob threats and that Luka never has to play without one if need be?
Yeah, his status, I guess, is uncertain. We may know more by the time we listen to this. I expect him to play, but he's also been out with a knee injury, so it's not just family, personal reasons, like all that. If you did not know, his mother passed away from cancer. His dad passed away his dad passed away when he was young. Those 2 were together. She gets cancer when he's I think in high school or maybe a little before that. And so they've gone on this journey together, like through high school to college to now to the NBA, and then she passed away. It's just, and they were living together. Like, she was always around the team. It was a huge thing. And so this is a monumental thing. And obviously, a 20-year-old's life to now have lost both of his parents. And so, if he plays or not, like, if it's personal reasons, I completely just like, there's no issue with that at all. I do expect him to play though, because he's one of those. He was there like the day that it got announced. He was at the arena. He was there for his teammates. He was out because of the injury, but he was still there. And so I do expect him to play. I think that it could be a good respite for him. But yeah, the injury is kind of different. I don't think that he'll play that much though. Like I think they'll go to that Maxey at the 5 unit a lot. They'll start with Gafford. And Lively's minutes have gone way down. He was playing like 26 minutes a game before the trades, and he's been playing like 18 minutes a game since the trades. Okay. They've really taken that load off of him, and I think some of that was try and stop the rookie wall from hitting him as hard as it was going to, with him starting and playing a bunch of minutes and like having a lot of pressure on him to be good and all that. And he was. I mean, he stepped up to every single bit of what the Mavericks asked him to do. But yeah, I don't know that they're going to rely on him as much in the playoffs and even in a series like this. But if they have him, it's great. And it's like it's an extra, and it's super good to have.
You know, we have talked a lot about Luka being unstoppable, and there's no defense for him. You just got to try your best. But the reason why I asked that question is Dorian Finney-Smith, as good of a defender as he was getting lit up by Kawhi. Because when Kawhi's on it, there's nobody that can guard him either, to me.
That's right.
And PJ Washington is typically that kind of body type is what you want guarding Kawhi. Because now Kawhi dominates more with strength, he'll back you down into 12, 15 feet where he's absolute cash in so many different ways. Turn around either shoulder, pull up, whatever. But if he can't back you down like that, then you can force him into a tougher contested shot. He does not get by people like that.
You know, a sneaky thing about this Mavericks defense being really good is that when somebody's backing down like that, and it's more against like younger players or players that just aren't aware and not like a star like Kawhi. I don't expect this to happen. Luka leads the Mavericks in deflections, and Kyrie gets a lot of deflections too. They get a bunch of steals. And the Mavericks they play real heads up when like someone's getting back down. They come over and help real quick because they can all recover real quick back to who they're supposed to, because their defense is predicated on that. So it's all about react, recover, switch, all that. And so they take some risks in that way to try and like help somebody when they're getting back down in that way. And so I'm curious if we see some of that too from the Mavs defense.
I have a major weakness that I need to call out as well. I think is something that Dallas should look to exploit is Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers. I don't think they've done a very good job of working out of double teams when Kawhi gets doubled. I think at times he can lag on the pass a bit, but the even bigger problem is that the Clippers only have one guy on the whole roster that consistently attacks closeouts well. So the Clippers are fourth in the league in 3-point percentage, right? Very good three-point shooting team, but you got to run them off the line. And I know that's going to be a point of emphasis. Norman Powell is amazing attacking closeouts. Terrence Mann, very solid as well, but when there's a rim protector there, he won't shoot the pull-up mid-range, and he has no floater at all. I don't know why he doesn't shoot the pull-up mid-range anymore. I think maybe analytics is discouraging that. Maybe he doesn't have a great mid-range percentage. Kawhi, he'll pump fake and step in, but the defender is still like right in his rear view. He doesn't really create that separation.
You got to step farther there, bud.
Right, he just doesn't really create the same separation exploding. And then Paul George isn't bad at all. The thing about Paul is he'll like hesitate and then still shoot a three. You know when a player will hesitate on a catch and shoot and then make the shot tougher for them? He'll do that a lot. And sometimes he'll make it though, because he's just his shot making is unbelievable at times. And we're going to need a great Paul George, by the way. We haven't talked about him enough, but we're going to need it. And then the last thing I'll say is Harden's big problem is that, and this also applies to Terrence Mann, they're not fully willing, despite their good 3-point percentage, to shoot those catch and shoot threes without hesitation. Harden will often take that rhythm dribble, and that like will nullify his advantage that's been created too and make the shot tougher for him, or just pass it up. And that's been a real point of emphasis. When the Clippers were rolling, Harden was taking those catch and shoot threes with little hesitation. So, by the way, last question, has Luka been taking catch and shoot threes this season? Because he used to have that same situation.
That's one of the big differences between Luka the last couple of years and Luka now. We used to make fun of Luka, and Luka even shared a meme of himself in 2019. The Drake one where he's like, he points at something, he's like, no, and then he points at something like, yes. Luka shared a meme of himself that was like, take the catch and shoot shot? No. Take a step back catch and shoot shot? Yes. Like because he would shoot better on on step back shots than on catch and shoot. But this year, his catch and shoot has been a lot better. That's why his 3-point percentage has been so much better this season. There's a case that he's the second best shooter in the NBA this season, like all over the court. Wow. He's shooting 38% from three, second most threes in the NBA this season, step backs, catch and shoot, all that. At one point in the season, this was probably like a month ago, he was shooting better on unguarded catch and shoot shots than Steph Curry was.
Wow.
Insane. So,
that's amazing.
But yeah, there you go. That's Mavs stuff. That's Clipper stuff. That's the crossover. If you guys want more stuff, Darian and I will be continuing to go until these teams play, and then maybe during the series, we'll reconnect and talk about this series and talk about how these teams are playing. But go check out those shows, guys. Thanks for listening to Locked On Mavs, Locked On Clippers.